Hello, this is BBC News with me, Nicholas Owen. We'll be taking a look at tomorrow morning's newspapers in a moment. First, the headlines at just before 11:30. Jeremy Corbyn has called on Labour not to give up in the wake of his party's defeat in the Copeland by-election.
I've been elected twice to lead this party. I'm very proud and very honoured to lead this party. All my energies go into leading this party. All our party members' energies go in towards campaigning for this party.
Britain faces a sustained and serious level of terror threat from Islamist extremists. That's according to the new independent reviewer of terrorism laws. Tens of thousands of people in South Sudan are starting to see food aid arrive in the region, where the United Nations has declared that famine has taken hold. The Olympic champion, Mo Farah, has said reports associating his coach with doping allegations are deeply frustrating and upsetting. Hello and welcome to our look ahead at what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow morning. With me are the journalist James Rampton and Martin Bentham, who's Home Affairs Editor at the London Evening Standard. Good evening to you both. Let's just have a look at some of the papers before we speak to them. The Metro, that leads with a story about 5 people injured when they were hit by a car in South London. The paper also marks this year's Oscars ceremony with a picture of the actress Emma Stone. The Times says the Scottish Government may be preparing to call a second independence referendum. It also features a photo of carnival goers in Venice. The Financial Times reports on the tensions between some American banks, who employ thousands of people outside the US, and the new president, who's promised to bring jobs back to the country. Theresa May could put an end to free movement for new European Union migrants within weeks, according to the Daily Telegraph. The paper also features a picture of the British actress Naomi Harris ahead of the Oscars. The Sun carries the same photo of Miss Harris, but leads with the story that a British man who was jailed in the US for murder has returned to the UK. And The Guardian has an exclusive report on claims that the National Health Service has lost the data of thousands of patients. Right, OK. Let us get started on the papers. James, would you begin for us, please? The story the Telegraph has: curb on migrants to start within weeks. This is European Union migrants.
Yes, this is very interesting. Was it Chairman Mao who said we're cursed to live in interesting times? It seems.
I think it was Confucius.
Oh,
actually.
well, and then retweeted by Chairman Mao, and then misquoted by Donald Trump. And I think that we really are in interesting times at the moment. Every day there seems to be some extraordinary story, particularly coming out of America. But this is a very interesting development. I know that it has been mooted around that this is going to happen, but the Telegraph has very good sources within the government, and it's suggesting that the cut-off date for EU migrants in this country is likely to be around the 15th of March, once the government's Article 50 bill has gone through Parliament, which means that those EU people who are here already will be allowed to stay, but anyone who arrives after that point will have much tougher visa restrictions and will have restricted access to benefits. So it's going to mark a massive change in the way that migrants are treated by this country.
This is a very tendentious issue indeed, isn't it, Martin?
Yes, I mean, the point is here that the government, if it's going to end free movement as part of the Brexit process, has to have a cut-off date at some point. It will be legally, I think, actually practically very difficult to do it before Article 50 is triggered. It could be the line could be drawn when we actually leave the European Union, but as a quote here from an unnamed source says, we could end up, with a great surge of half of Romania and Bulgaria coming here if we wait that long. So there obviously is a fear that if we had a very delayed cut-off date, then a lot of people would come in to get under the wire. So this is the idea. And of course, that would only apply the visa restrictions and so on once we had left. But it's having a legal point at which you say people who are here already, as you said, can stay. They've got an absolute right to be here. And anybody new will have to be subject to a visa regime potentially.
Ian Duncan Smith, obviously the Tory MP who's always Eurosceptic of long standing, he says here, Theresa May will be giving clarity by setting a clear deadline, while the European Union looks increasingly muddled and mean-spirited. There's a good old battle to be had over
well,
this, isn't
those
there?
two adjectives I might apply to some of the Brexiteers, muddled and mean-spirited, but I think there's definitely an intriguing battle ahead. Part of what Theresa May is going to have to do is finesse it with the EU to allow the hundreds of thousands of Brits who are abroad to have similar, right to stay there. And I think that will be an essential part of the deal, won't it?
Well, this is where, actually, I don't think on this issue at all the government's been mean-spirited. The government has been very clear that they want to allow European Union citizens who are here the right to stay, and that the only reason they haven't absolutely guaranteed that, as the House of Lords is trying to pass an amendment this week, or some Lords are trying to do that, to guarantee that, is that they want to make sure that the European countries that we're negotiating with give the same rights to us. And at the moment, some European countries are very happy to do that. Others are sort of saying that should be put further down the line in the negotiations. So I think the government has actually been very clear that it wants to give European citizens here at the moment the right to stay.
OK, let's move on.
I just like saying muddled and mean-spirited.
OK. Times front page. Martin, get us started on this one. Scots demand new referendum, number 10 fears. This is Theresa May writing in a Scottish magazine, actually trying to persuade people in Scotland to sort of send a signal to the SNP. So is there really a fear or not? Because I thought referendum has sort of gone away in Scotland.
I think there's inevitably a fear, because clearly, although all the opinion polls show that the Scottish people would vote against, as they did in the 2014 referendum, of course it's something that the government doesn't want to happen. Nicola Sturgeon is trying to threaten the government with the risk of a referendum. So Downing Street is understandably concerned that would be another distraction, another major potential change. And so the Prime Minister wants to urge Scottish voters at the local elections to send a message to the SNP to say, in essence, we want to stay and not to vote for the SNP in that situation. Whether it actually happened or not, whether the SNP has the courage to go for a referendum, I'm quite sceptical, because they won't do it unless they think they're going to win.
OK, and James, in this piece it says that Mrs May has been told she faces a double-headed devolution crisis because of Northern Ireland.
Absolutely. I mean, government figures are saying this is the greatest concern within the government about Brexit. Not only is the potential of a huge amount of chaos over another Scottish referendum, but also the great uncertainty that's gripping Northern Ireland at the moment. Their assembly has disbanded over a disagreement a couple of months ago, and they have got elections this Friday. But those look unlikely to resolve that crisis. There's still a heck of a long way to go to bring the two sides together. So I think that this huge sense of uncertainty is spreading throughout the UK, and I just hope that over the course of the next few months we can sort it out, because it looks quite chaotic at the moment.
OK, right, let's go on to The Guardian now. Then Jeremy Corbyn, reeling, as newspapers probably would say, to the...
on the ropes.
Talking chaotic,
but here he
Which
is.
leads us very nicely.
But here he is, their headline is Corbyn, give me time to develop policies. Well, off you go, James.
Well, I just think it's extraordinary. I mean, last week John McDonnell was blaming Tony Blair. Today Shami Chakrabarti was blaming the weather. Storm Doris, what on earth has she ever done to the Labour?
Lack of cars.
Lack of cars. The public services were wrong. The demographic has changed. I mean, it's really an unbelievable failure to face up to their own responsibility. And I speak as someone who might, under different circumstances, well be a Labour supporter, and I think it's a catastrophe what's happening to the Labour Party at the moment. I think Corbyn has been extremely bad for democracy. This is, I believe, a terrible government, and it's an open goal for a competent opposition. But Corbyn is running towards the goal, and he realises that he's got his shoelaces tied together. I mean, he cannot hit that open goal. And I think if there were a vaguely capable opposition leader holding the government to account, this country would be in better shape. OK, right. Very clear there. Well, Martin, Mr Corbyn's quite clear. He was voted twice. He got a bigger majority, didn't he, the second time when he went for the leadership. So why should he step down? He says, give me time, we'll develop things. Brexit a lot of troubles might come with Brexit. Things could change, couldn't they?
Well, therein lies the problem, doesn't it? Because, as you say, he was elected again very recently with an enhanced majority. He's still got the support of the grassroots, so it seems, and the issue for the Labour Party is if Corbyn was replaced, who would replace him? And the likelihood is it would be somebody of the same political mindset and so on. So that probably wouldn't necessarily assist them. The moderates in the Labour Party haven't really, A, got an absolutely obvious, credible candidate, and B, actually a policy agenda that is very clear at this stage. So I think it's not all about Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour Party itself is in a state of flux, doesn't quite know what it really stands for. And I think also, going back to the Copeland by-election, for example, the NHS obviously is a key message of the Labour Party. They were campaigning there very heavily on the closure of a maternity hospital, and that didn't resonate enough. And I think part of the issue there is, again, trust in their ability to deliver something. So even when they've got a popular message, part of the problem is that they perhaps haven't got enough support amongst the public for people believing they can deliver what they, the things that people actually like that they want to do.
I thought there's a fascinating quote that The Guardian has here. I'm not sure I've heard it many other places. I do my best to reach out to people, he said. But clearly persuading our wonderful media in Britain to report what we say on policy will be a big achievement. Somebody else who doesn't seem terribly
keen. Corbyn will
keen.
not be speaking at the Correspondents' Dinner this year. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's our fault now that, he's in the past been very vituperative in his condemnation of nuclear power, and hey presto, people in Copeland, where Sellafield is the main industry, don't like that. I mean, it's an extraordinary failure to face up to his responsibility.
But it's also part of the problem, isn't it, that you blame either the media or indeed party disunity. And of course, party disunity, which was what Shami Chakrabarti was also talking about today, is a problem. But on the other hand, you can't always say our message would be popular if it weren't for all these other distracting factors. Sometimes the message, people understand the message and they don't quite like it enough. That's the problem.
Indeed. OK, let's move on to something rather different. This is the Daily Mirror front page story here. Martin, I think you could set us off on this. Betrayal of our children. Schools face worst squeeze for 20 years. Teachers to be axed and so on. I mean, the Mirror, very much a Labour supporting or left-wing newspaper, might sort of flam these things up a bit. But on the other hand, we have heard that there are some cuts in education spending to come, and rather serious ones.
Well, it is a big problem, I think, for the government. It would be one of these sort of nagging headaches over, well, in this case, it's the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is not a left-wing institution. It's an independent, respected financial think tank that looks at these issues and is suggesting there's going to be funding will plunge 6.5% by 2020 per pupil. And so, of course, the government has got this austerity programme which is having to continue. Well, I say having to continue, but there is pressure on public finances, and of course things like education are a very big part of public finances. That gets squeezed, and of course it is politically very difficult, because when you have your local school that's suffering teachers being cut and so on, then that has a very big impact with voters. And of course, on top of this, there's a change in the funding formula. So certain parts of the country are going to be losing out as well, because, London, for example, there's a high likelihood that London schools will, which have previously had good funding relative to other parts of the country, will lose out. So there'll be a sort of double hit there for some schools as well.
It even says heating turned off, trips and clubs cancelled.
I find this really a very upsetting story. I mean, my three girls are at a fantastic state school, which recently sent us a letter saying, we're obviously very politely requesting, can you help us with a bit of money, because they don't have enough funding to keep their very high standards up. And this is much worse. Heating turned off, trips and clubs cancelled, possibly much bigger class sizes. I mean, it's one former cabinet minister says successive generations are being let down. I couldn't agree more.
I'll take the heating turned off with a bit of pinch of salt, I've got to say. I don't think they'll be sitting there freezing. But anyway, there we are. Maybe we should be a bit less prone to having the heating on all the time. But.
OK. Financial Times, they got is it in there sort of leading into stories inside, but interesting, I must say. James, Trump proves comedy gold on TV. Why is this one?
Well, he's just such a brilliant target for satirists. Saturday Night Live, the very long-running American satirical programme, is enjoying its best ratings for 20 years. Alec Baldwin does a brilliant impersonation of President Trump. Melissa McCarthy, another very well-known Hollywood actress, does a fantastic Sean Spicer, last seen attacking the journalists in the media room with the podium. He was so angry in this sketch, not in real life, I hasten to add. But for me, the proof that they're really hitting the target is that Trump and Spicer are watching it and complaining about it, you know that you're hitting home when your targets start to moan about it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Martin, the people who voted for Trump and the people who support Trump, I think, would agree with him, wouldn't they? I mean, they would think it's all very well to talk about comedy gold and audiences going up, but his Republican support is enormous.
Well, it seems to be, yes. I mean, he still seems to have the support of his core supporters who voted him into the White House. At the same time, I think even some of those people probably have a bit of a laugh as well, because he is quite. I mean, on a serious level, he's quite an alarming character. But on another hand, he is very easy, as you say, to lampoon. He's certainly got lots of character traits which are quite entertaining when they're not worrying you, and so. Yes, he is good material, isn't he, for any comedy sketch? One
of my favourite moments of watching the rugby, the Scotland-Wales match yesterday, was when the camera homed in on 3 very, very orange men sitting in suits. I thought, what on earth are they? And I realised they were dressed up as Trump. You know, he's become like fancy dress now. And he's ripe for satire because he's a very extreme character, and it's easier to laugh at someone than cry, perhaps.
And he has a thicker skin, so he's easy to...
Okay.
Yes.
We have to leave it there. James Rampton and Martin Bentham, thank you very much indeed. Just before we go, I should tell you that we've just had some sad news in, and this is that Sir Gerald Kaufman, the Labour MP for Manchester Gorton and father of the House of Commons, has died at the age of 86. That news just coming to us. But that is it. With that bit of news as well, that is it from the papers. Thank you very much indeed, as I say to James Martin. Coming up next, it's the Film Review.